Hello, Gold Coasters, and thank you to Gold Coast Libraries for inviting me to do this virtual author encounter. My name is Benjamin Stevenson. I am the author of Either Side of Midnight, which is my new crime thriller novel that came out just last week. So I hope, if you've already read it, I hope this helps give you some interesting background on the novel. And if you haven't read it yet, I hope this entices you to pick it up and give it a go. At the end of the event, I'll be answering a couple of questions sent in by Gold Coast Libraries and readers. But for now, I'll tell you a bit about the book. Either Side of Midnight is, as I said, a crime thriller novel. It opens behind the scenes of a live nightly variety television program. You know the ones. They've normally got a circular desk, some flashy plasma TV screens. They're on every night, maybe a light-hearted take on the news, those kind of things. And my host, he's a stand-up comedian, and he is giving a monologue, telling a few jokes. And the cast and crew is buzzing behind the cameras because they feel like there's a certain energy in the air tonight, and that he might be nervous because he's going to propose to his girlfriend live on air. At the end of the broadcast, the host turns to the camera, addresses it directly, says "I love you" to his girlfriend, but instead of pulling out a ring, he pulls out a gun from underneath the table and shoots himself. So from there, his identical twin brother doesn't believe that he would have done that. And he hires my amateur detective, Jack Quick, to look into whether or not this suicide, which has 1 million witnesses because it was broadcast live all across Australia, whether this suicide could in fact be a murder. And my story takes off from there. It's a page-turning mystery. I hope it has an ending that will surprise and shock you. And I really hope that it's a fast kind of pick it up and can't put it down type of read, and that you enjoy it. It's kind of based on a bunch of real-life events which kind of caught in my head and kept going around and around, and I couldn't stop thinking of them. There was this newscaster in the US in the 70s, and she broadcast for Fox News. And she did the same thing. She addressed the camera and she said, in keeping with Fox News's ethos of blood and guts, I present to you an attempted suicide. Something like that. The quote's not exactly right there off the top of my head. My memory, not so good. So she said that. She pulled out a gun. She shot herself. She survived the next 24 hours in hospital, but then she died the day after. And that's quite famous. They made a few documentaries about that. There's news stories. You can look it up and find it. Just read about it. Don't worry, the video is not out there, so you won't stumble across it. But it kind of captivated me. I just thought, this is so fascinating. I wonder what more is going on behind this. But also in our modern world, it moves a lot faster than it did in the 70s, you know. Those things, maybe they go out there and maybe it's a shock, but it disappears. Everything online these days stays online. And so I thought, if this happened now, there's no way of getting rid of it. And then you look deeper and, you look into things like YouTube and Facebook live streaming, which has its own dark side. Or even there's a politician who at a press conference did the same thing. And so I was kind of captured by this opening scene. And I thought, that is an extremely dramatic scene that can open a crime novel. Then the question is, this person shoots themselves. How is it a murder mystery? And I sat on that for 6 months. I didn't know the answer. And I tried to figure out how I can turn this kind of gripping opening into a larger plot that actually satisfied readers as a murder mystery with answers and suspense and thrills. And when I landed upon that plot, I knew I was sitting on something special, and that's when I was able to write the rest of the book and finish it off. And that's what Either Side of Midnight kind of came out of. And it is my character from my first novel, Greenlight, which was published in 2018, which was about a true crime podcaster, Jack Quick, who, when he's making a true crime podcast about a murder, and the murderer is in prison, he gets caught up in solving the actual murder himself. And that has consequences for him. I won't spoil the first book, but that has consequences for him. And it starts him off in this second book at a place where he needs money, basically. And so he's happy to accept Harry, who is the identical twin brother of the deceased television host. He's happy to accept Harry's money to poke around, ask some questions, even though he doesn't believe that it could be anything other than a suicide, but he needs the money, and so he's happy to take the money. and have a go. And that's kind of how he's brought into this story. But I was very, very careful because I was aware that this is my second book, and I wanted people who enjoyed Greenlight to be able to enjoy the second book and feel like there were threads that kind of harked back, or that Jack's character kind of can move forward. But I also really, really wanted it to be an absolutely perfect read for people who are first-time readers to Jack's character. So I think he's in both books, but I treat them very much as standalone rather than particularly series-driven books. And at the moment, I guess we're all kind of pandemic-driven, which I think a lot of people are saying, oh man, you must have had so much time to write, which I think every writer kind of nods and goes, oh, I'm killing it, and then goes home and sits down and watches Netflix for 7 hours a night and doesn't get any of their actual work done, much to the chagrin of their publishers. But I was lucky that when we were kind of all sent home, I'm a stand-up comedian as well, and when the country kind of shut down, I was on tour. I was in Adelaide, and we were about halfway through a tour of about 100 shows, and it would have culminated in the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, which ran through August, which Facebook has kindly sent me a reminder every day of what I was doing last year. You know, those on this day things. So they send you a reminder that says, on this day, you were doing this awesome thing in Scotland. And then I look at my day and I'm like, oh, I'm not doing this. Thanks, Facebook. Maybe you should have turned that off for the pandemic. But that's beside the point. So we were midway through a tour of about 100 shows, and in Adelaide, and we got sent home. We basically told, get on a plane tomorrow. The rest of your tour is cancelled. You're going home, which was kind of devastating creatively because we had written a show that was ready to go. What you kind of do is you kind of use up until the end of the Adelaide to write this show. And then at the end of Adelaide, it's finished. And that's when you take it on the professional, outside the Fringe Festival circuit, on the professional circuit, which again, doesn't really matter. But the point is that we'd written a show that we then didn't get to play. But I was editing Either Side of Midnight at the time, and I was making it perfect before it went to the printers. So I was kept nice and busy. Then I probably had about a month of moping about, being a mopey creative and thinking that, oh, the world is ending. Why would I bother writing books? But then I hit on a cool little idea, and I wrote another project for an audiobook project, which should be out within the next 6 months or so. And also the idea for my third book as well, which I'm writing at the moment amongst the release of Either Side of Midnight. So personally, in terms of where I'm at right now, in terms of writing process, I'm treating it fairly normally. I'm trying to do my daily word counts and keep putting books out there, and I'm pretty optimistic, and stuff like this I think is really fun, and it's something that I didn't do on the first book, and it's nice to be able to reach people and talk to them digitally. You can send me more questions if you want. I'm mainly on Instagram, is my main platform, and it's at Stevenson Experience. So feel free to send me questions there if I don't answer anything that you want answered. But yeah, I'm more than happy to. So, readers' questions. I might chip through a few of these and see what they are. So the first one is, what inspired you to write the book? Well, as I said, the newsreader in the 1970s. What can readers expect from the book? Well, like I said, I think it's a page-turning murder mystery. I think part of my day job is in publishing. I work at a literary agency, Curtis Brown, and basically I think of myself as a bit of the thriller guy. So most thrillers get sent through me, and I have a look at them, and I pride myself on picking the endings. And so I feel like I know the rules of thrillers, and I know the structures and the games that authors will play with readers. And so because I feel like I know them so well, I think that I'm able to subvert them effectively for surprises, but also stick to them well to surprise as well. So I really genuinely think that there's some twists and turns in this book that you won't see coming. But I also think it's a very interesting concept. I mean, it's a crime novel, so it's a whodunit. But because of the way in which the murder is presented, I mean, it's a live-streamed suicide. There's other questions that, how can this be a murder? So it's a how done it, and it's a why done it as well, on top of all of those. So I think it works on a bunch of levels as a mystery novel. And it's also, I personally think that good crime and mystery novels. Wow, talking for 10 minutes straight is really trying on my dry throat here. Not COVID related, don't worry about that. It's just me talking too much. I think, as well, that mystery novels, I actually think they're the best crime novels are really, really strong character novels with a few dead bodies in them. So while I think that I deliver on the dead bodies count, I'm really passionate about making my books interesting on a character level. Jack, he suffers PTSD. His brother had an accident when he was a child, and it's manifested itself in Jack. He has bulimia, and it's interesting for me to talk about masculinity and think about Jack's interactions with the world, and his interpretations of himself as a man when he has what is traditionally regarded as a female illness. And he can't even get diagnosed with actually having bulimia, because on the chart, when I wrote the first one, they may have updated the medical nomenclature for now, but on the chart when I wrote the first one, and when it's set for Jack, he can't get diagnosed because one of the symptoms of bulimia needs to be designated as an irregular period. And if you don't have an irregular menstrual cycle, you can't get the tick. You can't get the tick in the box, and the doctor can't diagnose you with bulimia. So Jack has this kind of issue reconciling himself with the world, his outer self and his inner self. And that is a battle that he faces while he's trying to piece together the mystery. So I hope I've delivered a complex character as well as a complex mystery. After the success of Greenlight, how did you find embarking on your second novel? I found it really intimidating. I wanted to make sure that I learned from any mistakes that I made in the first one. I say mistakes being that every time you put a book out, you immediately regret certain parts of it, whether or not those are things that are pointed out in, say, reviews or friends reading or fellow writers reading. It's actually beside the point. They're mostly stuff that isn't pointed out that you just keep in the back of your head. And so there were a few things where I just thought, I don't want to do that again, or I want to change that. How can I be better? And it puts a lot of pressure on you, the second album syndrome, because you want to make sure that it's fantastic, that it lives up to the first book, but that it's better than the first book. So I made a couple of direct choices in this second novel. The first novel deals with two simultaneous murders weaving in and out through the past and the present. And this novel goes straight down the line on the single mystery, the primary mystery, and sets up a lot more. I wanted to do a lot more rigid plotting on this one. So this one, I plotted it all out intricately, and I made sure that Jack was the character following this specific path, and his personal issues evolved differently in this novel as well. So I really wanted to make sure that it was different enough. There was a lot of pressure as well, as I've already mentioned, to make sure that it was a standalone novel so that new readers to Jack would enjoy it. And it took me a long time, to be honest. I think the effort of releasing a book, I thought that I'd written it and it got sent off to the printers, and then I kind of cracked my knuckles and thought, right, into the second one. But the publicity, it's ongoing. My books were released. Thankfully, they were released various places over the world, UK and the US, but they were released at different times. So I was actually still working on this book about a year after I thought that I would be working on the next one. I was still working on the first one. So it did take me a long time. I feel like I wrote it a lot slower, and I felt like it was harder to write. But my fiance told me that I said that about the first book. She said, you said this was the hardest thing you'd ever done. And then I finished the second one and I go, oh, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. And now I'm writing a new one and I'm thinking, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. So I think it's just walking up a hill and not being able to, looking down and going, that wasn't so bad, when it's difficult every time. But certain things get easier. I think I was able to have a better control of my plot because I could kind of self-edit a bit more, because myself and my publisher had built a relationship and I could kind of tell what they were going to challenge me on as I was writing it. And there's any authors out there, if you think when you're writing a book, I'll get away with this, you won't. They'll get you. You just think, this is, everything's good. It's a first draft. They won't notice this. They'll notice every single time they pull me up on it. So I was able to kind of self-edit a little bit, which made it a bit easier. And also, this is just I really wanted to personally This one I wanted to make it lean, like really, like not in terms of length, but just in terms of the events that happened and the plotting, really kind of make it lean. So it's I think it's more page turny as well, this one. How did you plan the complexity of the plot with its many twists and turns? It's tricky plotting out a novel because you need to some degree, let the characters speak for themselves or kind of follow their paths. But with a crime novel, I do believe you need to know where it's going fairly comprehensively. I think you could change things around and move things, but I think that it's important to know your direction, to have your compass set so that you are moving towards it. And that's important for two reasons. Is one, because you want to make sure that everything is laid in so that your finale is satisfying. But secondly, because every page in a crime novel, dare I say every sentence, which I personally believe in terms of tone and voice, I do think it needs to give some movement and some clue and some level. So I actually quite like, I don't put 3 clues in my book and then do an ending. I put 150 clues in my book and then tie them all in to the ending. Some of them I'll explain on the page of, oh, this clue happened, so it ties in here. And some of them I'll let sit as kind of contributing to the overarching thematic elements or the overarching plot, in which the detective doesn't have to sit down and say that thing out loud, but you know it is, and if you reread it, you know it is again, or you'll pick up on those. So I genuinely believe that every page should move a crime novel forwards, and should give the reader more information and dangle more in front of them. And in order to do that, you need to know what your ending is, because you can't dangle information if you don't know what it is. You can't hint towards the butler if you don't know it's the butler. There's no butlers in my book. It's not the butler. So yeah, that's kind of how I try and have a really good outline. I think with this book especially, it deals with some really complex issues and a really complex murder, just in a thought process kind of way. So I wanted to make sure that I had my research down pat, that I knew what I was talking about, and that it was realistic as possible. So that's kind of how I plotted it out. That said, this book started out without the character of Jack in it as the amateur detective. And I got a third of the way through it, and he bloody worked his way in. So for all of my good plotting, I hit a kind of wall, and I realized that there was a certain arc of the story that I needed to tell. And in order to tell that story, I really needed elements of Jack's character, not so much himself, but his family situation, his experience in television. And I realized I'd stitch myself up. I couldn't have a new character and call them Gary and pretend that it was a standalone book, because everyone would be like, well, Gary's just Jack. He's slightly different, and he's taller, and he's got a different haircut. So Jack wormed his way in despite my ambitious plotting to keep him out of it. How do you juggle comedy, writing, and your day job? I've been asked this question quite a lot, actually. Even before I was a published author, people would ask me just about comedy and the day job. So I've probably been asked this question hundreds of times over the last 10 years. The answer has changed. It's changed from 21-year-old me saying, it's fine. I love it. I catch the red eye from Perth. I do a show, and then I'm back at the office next day, and then have a couple of coffees and a Red Bull, and then I'm good to go. To, when I'm 26, maybe I would have answered this by saying, it's a bit of a delicate balancing act. I make sure that I'm committing time to all of them equally. And now I'm 31, and my answer is I'm tired. I'm tired all the time. I think it's important for me to carve out the times where I know that I'm going to be doing this certain thing and this certain thing and this certain thing. So for my writing process, I work 9 to 5, and then I write 5 to 7 before I leave the office. I make myself a new coffee, I put it on my desk, I put my headphones in, and then I write. And it's quite good because I've got the office space, which kind of pressures you into making you feel like you need to do something. And it's also, it's after work, so I want to go home. So if I'm not doing the work, I'm wasting my own time. And it's kind of like I'm my own manager, coming in and yelling at me. Not my manager at work yells at me in my writing job. My manager, me, is very mean. So that's how I do the writing. And then I balance the comedy. The writing of comedy is quite difficult. You kind of have to do it in front of a crowd and figure things out. Writing comedy, I think you require some really dedicated time to bash your head against the wall, which normally we do during the Sydney Fringe Festival, which I hope comes back next year in September. And then, like I said, there's a bit of a tour from January to, say, April, which normally, in an ideal world, I write a comedy show from in November through, say, January. Then I tour it while I'm writing it and refining it from January to April. And during that time, I'm starting to write a new book, but I'm not working particularly hard. And then I write a new book. I finish the book, let's say, between March and November. And so then I'm editing into the first third of the next year. So it kind of, just the way that tours line up, and because my books are published in September, kind of works out for me, just naturally. But I'm sure I'd find a way in either way. In terms of writing, balancing the writing, my honest strategy is that I think of the word count of my novel. My books are about 85, 90,000 words. I think of the word count of my novel. I divide it by the number of days to my deadline. So I've got 90,000 words to deliver in 180 days. That's 500 words a day. I'll write 500 words a day for 180 days, and the book will be finished at first draft stage. Then I procrastinate. Maybe I procrastinate for 45 days. So now I have 135 days to write 90,000 words, and now I have to write 750 words a day. And I think, I shouldn't have wasted those 45 days. And then I waste another 45 days, and I go, I have 90 days to write 90,000 words. And that's when I panic and start. So I wait until I have absolutely no chance of reaching the daily word goal upon my delivery day. And then I light a fire under myself and go. I work best under pressure. My publisher, I hope they don't watch this because they will be disappointed. But that's how I do it. I really need it. I really need the push to kind of, force me through it. Otherwise, it would take me. I'd probably get it done, but it would take me a couple of years to write a book instead of 1 year. How has your work as a literary agent helped you find your craft as a writer? Like I said, I think I know what I like. I think I know the rules of the genre, and I think I know what people like to read. I think especially getting published for the first time, I think I was able to use my skills in making a hook and pitching a hook quite cleanly, and knowing what the book's about properly, and not waftily, it's a murder mystery about this, it's about a TV show that kills themselves live on television, and somebody is asked to see if it can be a murder or not. I mean, that sentence itself, I do think it pulls on quite a few pitching skills from my day job to be able to put together. So I think that really helped. And I think that knowing what voice is, and how to capture the voice that I wanted to write with, knowing what else is out there, and being widely read, as many authors are, I think that I have a reasonably good grasp on knowing what voice I want to use to tell each particular story. My new book has a very different voice, and it took me some time to work through that in the opening stages of it. So, I'm not perfect at it, but I think that those skills definitely helped me. What advice do you have for budding writers? I've got heaps. I'll give you a few generic ones and then a few practical ones. I genuinely think you have to write what you want to write and what you love writing, and what you can't go to bed without putting on the page. I think a lot of people can look at stuff on the shelves and think, well, how do I do it like that? Or how do I do it like this? And the truth is that those authors that you're looking at didn't do it like that until they did it like that, until they sat down and did it themselves. And a lot of them forged innovative paths through. And if your story is strong enough and your voice is strong enough, then you should write your book and not feel the pressures or professional jealousies of, I say this as someone who has a lot of professional jealousies. Some writers write so quickly. Oh my God, I'm so jealous. I'll say to them, oh, how's the new book going? And they're like, I've written 3 in the time that you've written 4 pages. And I'm like, I hate you. But all very good natured. But I think that, it's very easy to get caught up looking at what I should be writing, what I should be doing for the market or what's on the front shelf at the bookshop. And that's easy to actually lose the core of your story. The second is to genuinely know what the question of your book is. And by that I mean, when you are putting together a query letter, which is basically a short blurb, there must be a question for your main character that must be answered by the end of the book. They must change. It doesn't have to be answered in the synopsis. And to be honest, writing a synopsis is not that hard, not that important. It's hard. Writing a synopsis is hard, but it's not that important, is what I meant to say. It's important for us to see the beats of the story, or publishers to see the beats of the story. But it's something that a lot of authors stress about, that genuinely it just needs to kind of relay the information of the story. But the query letter and the blurb, I think, is fantastically important. And I think it's a chance to say in 6 sentences what your book is about. If you can't write in 6 sentences what your book is about, there is a chance that you don't know what your book is about. So, and I'm not saying that means the book is bad. I'm saying that it's an opportunity to think about what your book really is and what you want it to say and what you want to happen in it. And maybe that leads to some edits that make the whole book fantastic, or maybe it just leads to you thinking about it more and knowing about it better. And I think that is so important, because you can change, a book can be finished and you can change a couple of words. You can change 150 words across a 90,000 word manuscript, and you can change the meaning of a book. And if you really know what you're looking for, I think that is the difference between just finishing a book and really, really nailing a story or a theme. And so I think that's really important. Practical tips. Don't kill the dog. Never kill the dog. That's a really, really bad move. I think that getting word counts down, I think, like I said, it's important to me to do them per day so that I know what I'm tracking. But it can be really demoralizing if you solely base your thought process on the word count. So you need to, give yourself those breaks and make sure that you're not just putting down the words to put the words down. And the last practical tip for budding writers, which is more about getting published, is get the name right of the person that you're sending it to. Don't send it to a Mr. when it's a Miss or a Mrs. That's all, because it's a bad look. Who are your favourite authors and why? I've got many. I love anything in Australian crime. I think is just fantastic. At the moment, I think our writers are top class, and so any one of them I will happily shed praise on. Particularly, I do like Jane Harper's books. I think she really busted down the door of the market and allowed people like me to get published in this genre in this country, which was previously a reasonably difficult genre to get published in. So, and I think her books are really, really strong. I think they perfectly nail good character dramas mixed with a couple of dead bodies in them. I really like Peter Temple. The Broken Shore is my favourite novel. It was robbed of the Miles Franklin, and but truth won, so good. I guess amends were made. But The Broken Shore is one of my favourite novels of all time. I really like Stuart Turton, who is very, very tricky. He's only written one book so far, but his next one comes out in October. I think he's a UK writer. He writes brilliant ideas and big, crazy things that I'm sure his publishers thought, oh no, when he put it on their desk, but he pulls it off. And I like Scott Smith as well, who wrote a novel called Simple Plan, which is one of my favourite novels as well. And anything by Helen Garner, I just devour. I just love her writing. I think she's so real and so intimate in the world. And so, yeah, I really like her. What am I reading at the moment? At the moment, I'm reading the new Jasper Fforde novel. It's called The Constant Rabbit, and I'm quite liking it. And I am reading Jane Harper's The Survivors, which comes out in a couple of weeks. What's next for Benjamin Stevenson? Well, I'm working on my third novel, which I can't tell you about because I don't entirely know what it's about yet. But it's a standalone murder mystery set amongst a family reunion. Let's say that. I actually don't think my publisher even knows that much yet, so a bit of inside gossip there. It could change as well, so don't hold me to that if the next book is a completely different thing. But it will be a standalone murder mystery. And I'm releasing my my Audible original. It's a short audio book in the next 6 months too. So keep an eye out for that. I think it's free for download as well, but no release date for that one yet. So at the moment, read this one. That's the one. I mean, it's terrifying releasing a book during a pandemic. So if you walk past a local author in the shop, it doesn't have to be my book. Just if something you think that looks all right, grab it. It will help the indie bookseller. It will help the author. So yeah, go out and read a bunch of stuff. That is all from me. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for Gold Coast Libraries for inviting me to do this. It's been really lovely to chat to you. I'm on Instagram at Stevenson Experience, also on Facebook at The Stevenson Experience. So please do shoot me a message there if you have a question about the book. Shoot me a message if you have a guess for the ending. If you want to guess the ending, send me a message what you think it is. Send me the page number you're on, and I mean, I'll give you a thumbs up if you're right. Well, I won't until you finish the book, but you can have kudos points for that. And if you ever see me in person at a festival, you can say, I guessed your ending, and I'll buy you a beer. Sure. I'll commit to that on video. We'll see who remembers it and scams me for a beer. And if you didn't and remember this long enough until festivals are back and you scam me for a free beer, good on you. You've earned it. Yeah, so thank you very much to Gold Coast Libraries, and I hope you enjoyed watching, and I hope I could tell you a little bit about my book and tell you a bit about behind the scenes of writing it. I hope you have a nice night. Bye.